One of the first new places I've never been to before was the little hamlet of Edwall, Washington. Places like Edwall weren't accidents. They were engineered into existence by steel rails and wheat growing. I got out and took a look around, but to tell you the truth, I think this was about it. Edwall's high point was around 1910 to 1920, with a population of around 300 to 400. Today it sits about 140. There is some tragic history here. Northwest Airlines Flight 115 crashed near here in 1951, killing all 10 aboard. Sorry, this trip is really starting on a downer. Let's move on. I've already made a video on Sprague. I try and post a link in the description, but it's one of those small towns where the railroad still feels like the reason the place exists these days, along with the farming. Sitting along Interstate 90 today, it's easy to pass by without realizing this was once a major stop on the Northern Pacific Railway. Every September, Sprague still fills with classic cars during Sprague Days, bringing people back into town and briefly reviving the old Main Street atmosphere that once defined railroad communities across eastern Washington. In 2026, the show is on September 12th. St. John, Washington is another of those classic Palouse farm towns that owes its existence to wheat, railroads, and stubborn optimism. Founded in the 1880s and named after settler Philip Korn's hometown of St. Johann, Germany, the town grew as a shipping point for the surrounding wheat country. Like many small towns in eastern Washington, its busiest days are long behind it, but the grain elevators still stand tall, a reminder that around here, wheat has always been the real boss, and everybody else just worked for it. Colfax turned out to be one of the biggest surprises of this road trip to Utah. I originally stopped here expecting a quick visit, maybe enough for a few minutes of footage, but almost immediately it became obvious the town was larger than I thought and had more history than I had time to ferret out. The town is built in a narrow river valley. It gives the feeling of being much larger. The downtown is well preserved, and there seemed to be a lot of hustle and bustle going on despite the fact I was there on Easter. One thing that is definitely going to get me back there soon is St. Ignatius Hospital, which has become famous for both its history and rumor of ghost sightings. Tours are available! Check out the video on Colfax I published on May 6th. Let's keep trucking. There's a town named Colton and another called Uniontown down the road that I want to show you next. Colton, in its boom years, probably had a population of about 700 or 800 citizens. Today, well, as of the 2020 census, it had about 401 to be exact. And there goes two of them. For some reason, I don't think this guy's in business anymore. As I walk the rough and tumble streets of Colton, I cannot but reflect on the difference small town living is compared to city life or even the suburbs. This town is probably one of the best groomed and clean town that I've come across in a while. I'll be honest, I'm impressed. Gold star for Colton. In the center of town is the Veterans Memorial. This one appears to be for the First World War, remembering those from Colton who fell during that war. Not every town I've stopped in has a memorial, but to be honest with you, I see more of them than I expected. When the German settlers built St. Gall, they clearly weren't planning on a temporary stay. You don't build a church like this unless you intend to put down roots and probably argue over the roof fund for the next 100 years.
They don't build them like that anymore.
Like Colfax, Uniontown is another place that I should have done more research on before hitting the road. It's terrible when you get home, you start assembling your footage and research the town and discover you didn't even see the gorilla in the room. In this case, it is the St. Boniface Catholic Church just up the hill from where I took video from. How do you miss that? It's a small town of only a couple of hundred people and is probably considered a bedroom community for Pullman, Washington, or Lewiston, Idaho these days. Thomas Montgomery founded the town and originally named it Montgomery before eventually becoming Uniontown. He was known to be one of those classic rough-edged frontier founders whose story feels almost forgotten today. He established the town in the 1870s during the first major wave of settlement into the Palouse region, when eastern Washington was rapidly transforming from open prairie into wheat country. Montgomery reportedly operated both a store and post office and became one of the key early figures in the settlement. The name change to Uniontown may have reflected hopes of uniting factions within the community after disputes developed among settlers. And disputes definitely developed. Historical accounts describe Montgomery as controversial and difficult to work with. I think we all know people like that, even these days. Tensions apparently became strong enough that some residents and businesses relocated nearby and helped build up Colton instead, the town we just drove through. That rivalry between the two towns lasted for years. The most dramatic part of the story is Montgomery's death. In 1883, he was reportedly killed during an altercation connected to local disputes. Accounts vary somewhat depending on the source, which is common with frontier-era stories, but the event reflects how personal and volatile town politics can become in isolated settlements during that period. Heck, nothing has changed in 143 years, as far as I can tell. But let's not go there. Let's get back into the family truckster. The next stop is in Idaho. Roll on. One of the reasons I took the route that I did was because I have never driven in these parts before. Well, obviously I had to get about 80 miles from home before I was on new roads, but you know what I mean. One of the sights that blew me away was the Lewiston overlook just off of Idaho Highway 95. It's about 2,000 feet from river level to the plateau. Lewiston sits in a geographic oddity. It's one of the lowest inland ports in the West, while the Palouse region begins almost immediately above it, where I've been driving for the last few hours. Those two people were smoking marijuana and enjoying the view. Welcome to Grangeville, Idaho. For now, this is just a quick visual tour of the town, a first look before I post my full motel review and a video featuring a deeper walkthrough of downtown. That's where I stayed, the Downtowner Inn. Hit the subscribe button and push the bell button so you are notified when this not-so-positive review is posted. This is the town of Riggins, Idaho. It feels like the kind of place built for adventure. Rafts on trailers, fishing boats in tow, and the Salmon River running hard right through the canyon. But before it was Riggins, before it became known as Idaho's whitewater capital, this little river town carried a much rougher name, Gouge Eye. According to local history, it was named after a saloon fight, the kind of frontier disagreement where apparently losing your temper could also mean losing an eye. That was the late 1800s, when this canyon was still wild, remote, and far less forgiving than it is today. Back then, this wasn't a tourist stop. It was a supply point for miners, loggers, ranchers, and anyone trying to make a living in the Salmon River country. The river itself was both a lifeline and an obstacle, moving people and goods through a landscape that still feels rugged even by modern standards. By 1901, the name Gouge Eye was retired, and the community became Riggins, named after local settler Richard Riggins. Probably a wise business decision. It's hard to attract respectable commerce when your town sounds like a warning label. And over time, the town changed. Logging and milling helped sustain it for decades, highways improved access, and eventually the river became less about survival and more about recreation. Today, people come here to raft, fish, jet boat, and explore one of the deepest river canyons in the country. But it's worth remembering that underneath the outfitters, motels, and river guides is a place with a rough frontier beginning, one where a single bad night in a saloon somehow became the town's first identity. Riggins may sound peaceful now, but Gouge Eye reminds you that peace was not always the starting point. The journey continued down State Route 95 for quite some while. It's beautiful territory. I just wish the lighting was better, but between the low sun and the dirty windshield, this is the best I can do. We're approaching the town of New Meadows. This is where 95 intersects with 55, which we'll be taking. This will send us directly down to Eagle, Idaho, which is a posh suburb of Boise. I'll tell you more about that later in this video. When driving south out of McCall, going to Boise, you've basically followed the Payette River. That's it, on the right. State Highway 55 tracks this canyon for much of its length. On this stretch, I was pretty lucky. I frequently had the road to myself. No slow drivers ahead, and no tailgaters on my rear behind. But with all those twisty turns, it was not like the long stretches of relaxed driving the Palouse offered. By the time I got to Eagle, I was pretty much sick of driving. And I was only halfway to Jackpot, Nevada, where I was staying the night. I'm filming this as we approach Eagle. It's where a lot of out-of-state money went when they all moved to Idaho. I failed to get any video, but it is the same as any other generic suburb outside a larger city. It has all the same stores, same restaurants, same everything. I call it Generica. I'm sure someone came up with that term before me. Leave a note in the comments if it was you. Oh, the more affluent places like Eagle usually come up with some twist, just to make them different than the others. I don't know what twist Eagle adopted. Let's keep driving. After a lot of driving and a genuine butt ache, I finally made it to the outskirts of Twin Falls. I wasn't planning on going into town itself. The traffic here can be rough, and honestly, I just wasn't in the mood to deal with it. So instead, I stopped at the visitor center just across the bridge, stretched my legs, grabbed a bite to eat, and took some time to walk around and get some footage. It's a great place to stop and take in the canyon, though unfortunately, no base jumpers were throwing themselves off the bridge today. I stayed the night in Jackpot, Nevada at the Barton's Club 93 Hotel and Casino. That's it right there. I'll be editing a video review of it sometime in the future, along with a walk-around video. I like Jackpot. Arrive on a weekday, and it's cheap, the people are nice, and to me, just has a nice vibe to it. There is not much to the town, as you can see. Several casinos, Cactus Pete's being the largest, and I'm pretty sure Barton's Club is second. I would imagine most of the people in town are affiliated with the casinos in one manner or another. No other reason to be out here, in my opinion. Enjoy the drone flight over town. Okay, time to get out of here. We got some Nevada to do before we get to Utah. I know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I really think that northern Nevada has some of the best scenery around. I pulled off the road about 20 miles south of Jackpot to get this drone shot. Tell me in the comments if you agree with me or not. After leaving Jackpot in a southbound direction on Highway 93, in case you were wondering why Barton's Club 93 Hotel and Casino has the number 93 in the name, it's because of this highway. But I'm getting sidetracked. Well, I eventually made it to Wells, Nevada. Now, I've done 2 or 3 drive and walkthroughs of the town, but having my newly acquired drone, I decided to get an aerial view of the place for you as I jet through town. Have a look, and then let's move on. I decided to bypass Wendover on this trip. I usually do. Let's keep rolling. There's the casinos themselves, but I don't need them. I already lost my $1 gambling budget for this segment of the trip in Jackpot. I'm still steaming over that string of bad luck. I really don't know how much of this drive on the Salt Flats I should edit out. I don't want to bore you all to sleep, but imagine this drive on and on for another 30 minutes. Rest stop ahead. We'd better take it. Here we are. We made it. There's something about pulling into a rest stop out here on Interstate 80 just east of Wendover that reminds you how big the American West really is. Or the whole country is, for that matter. After seeing the miles of open highway, desert flats, and the endless white stretch of the Bonneville Salt Flats stretching out into the distance ahead of me, this feels less like a stop and more like a pause button. A chance to get out, stretch the legs, and take in the silence. Out here, the wind has room to move. The mountains sit far off in the distance, and if the conditions are correct, they appear as islands from the mirages created by the salt flats. But this is not my destination. Nobody puts a rest stop on their bucket list, but maybe you should with this one because of how unique it is. Look around and remember that travel isn't just about where you're going. It's the journey, not the destination, that matters, especially on a road trip. I just had to get this shot in for the ladies out there who have never seen the men's room at a rest stop. This is actually one of the better ones. Let's move on. There it is. So close we can almost touch it. Actually, it's at least 20 minutes away, but we'll be there soon.